I decided to take a break last summer. I needed space after a long project. I found this charming beach cottage on Airbnb. It was old but cozy, nestled between the ocean and thick trees. When I arrived, the salty air felt refreshing. I thought this would be just what I needed. I set up my things and tried to relax. It was quiet, except for the creaky floorboards and the sound of waves crashing. I felt good at first. But then came the second night. I woke up to a strange sound. Something was tapping against my window. I figured it was branches in the wind, but it didn't stop. Tap, tap, tap. My heart began to race. I lay there in the dark, staring around the room. I told myself it was nothing, but I felt unsettled. I wondered if I was imagining it. I wanted to sleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling. The next night I heard laughter. It came from the beach. I peered out but saw no one. Just dark waves crashing under moonlight. It felt eerie, like something was wrong. The laughter echoed in my ears. Was it real? I pulled the blanket over my head and tried to shut it out. The days went by slowly. I thought a walk on the beach might help clear my mind. As I strolled along the shore, I noticed footprints in the sand. They led toward the water, but just stopped. There were no signs of anyone coming back. I stood there feeling uneasy. I scanned the area, half expecting to see someone emerge from the trees. But nothing. It was just me and the ocean. I tried to convince myself not to worry, but my gut twisted with uncertainty. That night I settled on the porch for some fresh air. I glanced toward the water and saw a shape standing still. It was hard to make out in the dark. I squinted to see clearer. It looked like someone, but it didn't come into focus. My heart raced again. I reached for my phone thinking I'd snap a picture, but as soon as I moved, the figure vanished. One moment it was there, and the next, it was gone. I felt sick to my stomach. Why was I alone in this cottage? What had been watching me? By the end of my stay, I felt desperate to leave. I barely packed my things. I just wanted to get out. As I drove away, I couldn't help but think about everything that had happened. I kept asking myself if those things were real. What did I see? The cottage remains etched in my mind. I still can't shake that feeling. Something was there with me that week. Something I couldn't see, but I knew it was watching. I wished I could forget it all, but the memories linger. I hope I never have to go back. After leaving the cottage, I tried to push everything out of my mind. Back home, I threw myself into work, thinking that the distractions would help, but they didn't. The feeling of being watched stayed with me, creeping into my thoughts on quiet nights. I even started to notice shadows that shouldn't be there, just out of the corner of my eye. It was unnerving. One evening, I was organizing photographs on my laptop. I found some from my stay at the cottage. I hesitated but decided to look them over. As I clicked through the images, my stomach twisted. Most were fine, pictures of sunsets, waves, and the little details of the cottage decor. But then I came across a photo I didn't remember taking. It was blurry, but I could see something in the background. It looked like that same shape I saw from the porch. I squinted at it, trying to make sense of it. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as a trick of the light. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. My gut told me to look closer. I zoomed in, and that's when I saw it. There were eyes, staring out from the shadow. A chill ran down my spine. My heart raced as dread filled me. How had I not noticed this before? The weight of its gaze felt heavy, and I suddenly longed for the comfort of daylight. But I was inside, and a creeping fear made me want to bolt outside. I stared at the screen, frozen. The laughter rang in my mind, the same laughter I heard that night. It was a haunting sound, and I could almost hear it play again. I felt trapped in my own home. I shut my laptop and tried to shake it off. The next day, I decided to go back to the beach. Maybe I was being silly. I wanted to face the place that had haunted my thoughts. I thought that being there during the day might set my mind at ease. As I drove back, every mile sent wave after wave of unease back into my gut. When I arrived, the beach was more crowded than I remembered. Families played, children splashed in the surf, and dogs dashed around with their owners. The chaos felt soothing, somehow grounding me. I walked along the shore, trying to focus on the happy faces around me, but then I spotted something on the sand, a small wooden figure, half buried. I picked it up and brushed the sand away. It looked like a carving of a person, worn and faded. My heart pounded. It seemed familiar, like something straight from a bad dream. I turned it over and gasped. There were symbols etched into it. I had to know what they meant. I went to a local shop, hoping someone could tell me about it. As soon as I walked in, the shopkeeper's expression changed. Her face went pale. "Where did you get that?" she asked, her voice shaky. That's when I understood that I was about to uncover something bigger than I ever imagined. The shopkeeper's eyes darted back to the wooden figure in my hand, a mixture of fear and concern washing over her face. "You need to put that back right now," she said urgently, her voice low, like she was afraid others would hear us. My heart was racing. Why? What's so special about it? She hesitated, biting her lip. "It's a talisman," she finally said, still glancing around as if she expected someone to walk in and snatch it away from me. "It's said to ward off unwanted attention." Her words sent a jolt through me. Unwanted attention? The laughter, the feeling of being watched, it all came rushing back. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to mask my panic. "It protects the bearer from someone or something. I've heard stories about it, but I thought they were just that. Stories." She grimaced. "People have been saying that it doesn't always work." I felt my hands tremble around the figure. I wanted to dismiss her words, but the dread seeping back in made that difficult. "What happens if it doesn't work?" "Bad things," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "You'll start to see things, hear things, like the shadows you mentioned." "What do you mean? People have seen things?" She nodded, glancing nervously toward the door again. "Don't dwell on it. Just get rid of it. You don't want to invite trouble." I backed away slowly, the figure still in my hands. "What if I don't want to?" I asked, unable to let go. That's when the bell above the door jingled, and in walked a man. He was tall and looked disheveled, his face haggard. I recognized him. He had been at the beach the day before with his kids, laughing and playing, but now, there was no joy in his eyes, only a wild glint of fear and desperation. He locked eyes with the shopkeeper, and then focused on me. "You found it, didn't you?" I was frozen, unable to move or speak. The shopkeeper looked between us, her expression torn. "Maybe we should talk outside," she said, urging the man with a wave of her hand. "I don't have time to waste," he almost shouted. "You can't just walk away, you don't know what you're dealing with." His intensity made my heart race. The shopkeeper stepped between us, trying to calm him down. "Please, it'll be okay. Just put it down." But I couldn't put it down. Somehow the figure felt like a connection to all the darkness that had surrounded me since I left the cottage. Suddenly, the room felt colder. I looked around, and the shadows seemed to deepen. Everyone else in the store was still, as if frozen in time. My breath caught. Then I heard it again. The laughter, haunting and familiar, echoing in my mind. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew that something was off. I had to get out of here. I took a step back, clutching the figure tighter, ready to make a run for it. The man's eyes went wide as recognition crossed his face. "You need to leave now." Then everything went dark. I felt myself hit the ground hard. The darkness swallowed me whole, as if the air itself had turned into a thick fog. I blinked, trying to regain my vision, but it didn't help. I was engulfed in a heavy silence. Then little by little the shadows around me began to lift. I found myself sprawled on a wooden floor, cold and unfamiliar. I pushed myself up, panic flooding back as I scanned my surroundings. I wasn't in the shop anymore. I was in a dimly lit room, the air thick with an unsettling heaviness. Splintered wood and dusty artifacts were strewn about, casting jagged shadows on the walls. It reminded me of the barn near the beach house. Had I somehow been transported there? I stood up cautiously, all senses heightened. That's when I heard faint whispers, echoing from a corner. "Leave," they hissed, distorted and haunting. The words chilled me. I was about to turn, but an urgency pulled me back. I still had the talisman clutched in my hand. "Keep it together," I whispered to myself, stepping carefully across the floor. The whispers grew louder, merging into a cacophony of voices, filling my head. "You don't belong. You need to go." I froze, paralyzed by the weight of those words. A surge of dread roared within me. Somehow I knew they weren't just figments of my imagination. The figure had something to do with this place. Whatever it was, it beckoned through the shadows. Suddenly a flash caught my eye. I turned to see a figure in the corner of the room just beyond the reach of the dim light. My heart raced. It was a child, no older than 7, face pale, with wide eyes. The same eyes I had seen at the beach, in the midst of laughter. "Help me," the child said, extending a small hand towards me. The moment felt unreal, like a trap waiting to spring. What was I supposed to do? I took a step closer, drawn in by the desperate plea. "What happened to you? Where are we?" The child didn't respond. Instead, the hand slowly dropped, and their face twisted in fear. "It's here," they murmur barely above a whisper. I whipped around, scanning the dark corners. I could feel something watching me, but I couldn't see what it was. The room felt smaller, closing in on me with unseen pressure. Before I knew it, an icy wind swept past me, knocking me back against a wall. I gasped, struggling to catch my breath. The whispers crescendoed. The child looked horrified, and in that instant, everything shattered. The room swayed, folding into itself. I lost my footing and tumbled back into darkness, the ceiling collapsing. I heard a voice calling out, "Find the truth." Then it all went silent, and I was falling again, down a seemingly endless void, racing toward some unknown fate. All at once I realized I wasn't just running. I was being hunted. And whatever that was, it was getting closer. The ground solidified beneath me, and I gasped awake, jolted by the impact. I was sprawled on the floor of a different room, barely lit and littered with broken furniture. The air was thick with dust and the sharp scent of mildew. I scrambled to my feet, disoriented, but the urgency in my chest drove me to move. I could still hear faint echoes of the child's voice, now a dusted memory in the back of my mind. "Find the truth," resonated through me like a heartbeat, demanding my attention. I had to focus. An overwhelming need to escape this place pressed against my thoughts. I glanced around, looking for a door or any other way out. The walls were crudely made. Splintering wood and peeling paint gave it a haunting quality. But it wasn't just the setting that gnawed at me. It was the sensation of being watched. An instinct told me something lingered just beyond the shadows. As I made my way through the room, I noticed an old chest near the far wall. Dust clung to it, but it wasn't locked. Trepidation held me back for a moment, but curiosity pressed me on. I envisioned what secrets might lie inside, an answer to the uncanny events swirling around me. I shoved the lid open, my mind racing. Inside was a jumble of relics, tarnished trinkets, faded photographs, and what appeared to be a diary. I grasped the diary first, the leather cover cracked and worn. Could it hold some secrets about this place? Clutching it to my chest, I lifted my gaze to the room again, more alert than ever. Just then, I heard a scuff against the old wooden floor. My heart dropped. Instinctively, I stepped back, convinced I wasn't alone. A shuffle grew louder, approaching from behind a tattered curtain. The whispers returned in a rush, overwhelming, urging me to leave. "Get out!" they clamored, rising like damp fog. I took another step back, my breath quickening. "You're not safe here." Then I saw it, a shadow slipping between the gaps in the fabric. My heart pounded in my chest as I stumbled back, my mind racing. Was this the presence I sensed earlier? Was it watching me all along? The diary slipped from my grip as I turned to flee. I ran toward the door at the opposite end, desperation fueling my movements. I slammed into it, the wood protesting under my weight. I pushed against it, but it wouldn't budge. Suddenly a hand shot out from behind the curtain and grabbed my arm. I screamed, a sound filled with terror and disbelief. That's when everything changed. The shadowy figure emerged, dimly illuminated by the meager light. My breath hitched at the sight. It was another child, much like the first, but this one was different. Their eyes flickered with a knowing darkness. "Find the truth," they echoed with a voice surprisingly deep for one so small. "Or you'll never leave." My heart raced as I fought to process their words, my palms sweating around the doorknob. Then the lights flickered, and the whispers grew frantic. In that moment, I realized the stakes were higher than I imagined. The truth was my only chance. Before I could respond, the room shuddered, a rumble that shook the very foundation. I knew then that this fight was far from over. Whatever was hunting me was closing in, and I was running out of time. I jerked my arm away from the child's grip and stumbled backward, heart racing. The whispers morphed into a chaotic chorus, drowning out my thoughts. My fingers finally found their way to the doorknob again. I slammed my weight against the door, desperation flooding my senses. I had to get out. Suddenly, a gust of wind whipped through the room, rustling the dust and sending the old chest crashing to the floor. The child, still looming by the curtain, didn't move. Their eyes remained locked on me, a dark abyss that pulled me in and hardened my resolve. "Find the truth," they repeated, and this time it felt like a command. With renewed urgency, I twisted the knob again, throwing my shoulder into the door. It creaked loudly as it finally gave way, cracking open to reveal a narrow hallway. The air felt colder here, a stark contrast to the stifling room I had just left. Instinctively, I glanced back at the child, hoping for some reassurance. Instead, I was met with an unsettling smile that suggested knowledge far beyond my comprehension. I shook off the instinct to linger. There was no time. As I stepped into the hallway, the whispers receded but didn't vanish entirely. They now murmured softly, forming a steady rhythm that echoed in my ears. I pressed forward, my surroundings dimly lit and uncertain. The corridor led to a series of doors, their surfaces worn and splintered. I hesitated at the first one, my breath shallow, and placed my hand on the faded knob. Something felt wrong. I could hear faint sounds, a low humming that seemed almost melodic. I glanced back, half expecting the child to be following me, but the hallway echoed in silence. With cautious determination, I turned the knob and stepped inside. The dim light revealed another room, cluttered with more remnants of the past, rusted tools, broken furniture, and what looked like an old sewing machine. In one corner sat an overturned chair, and in the other, a cracked mirror hung crookedly on the wall. A chill ran down my spine as I approached the mirror. My reflection was distorted, a ghostly version of myself as if the glass itself was warped by time. But as I peered closer, something else caught my eye. It was a scrap of paper lying just below the mirror's edge. I knelt down to retrieve it, feeling a sense of urgency. My heart raced as I unfolded it. Scrawled in hasty handwriting were the words, "They're watching. Trust no one." A rush of adrenaline coursed through me. I felt their presence again, the knowing darkness that had pulled me into this twisted reality. I had to find whatever truth lay hidden beyond this place. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me, a heavy thud, then another. I spun around, dread pooling in my stomach. The noise was coming from the hallway, and it was getting closer. Panic set in. I raced back toward the door, the paper still clutched tightly in my hand. As I burst out of the room, I froze at what I saw. The child was standing there, not alone anymore. Two more figures emerged from the shadows, identical in their eerie smiles and knowing eyes. I felt the pull of their presence enveloping me, suffocating. The whispers grew louder, the urgency thickening the air. I was trapped, and the truth I sought was closing in with them. "Find the truth," they echoed, their voices lining up in a chilling harmony. "Or you'll never leave." My heart thundered in my chest as I turned to flee. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. I sprinted down the hallway, my feet pounding against the cold floor. The sound of the children's voices faded behind me, yet their words lingered, a haunting reminder of my urgency. I had to escape, but I also needed to confront whatever truth lay hidden among these walls. The corridor twisted sharply to the left, and I skidded to a stop. A door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of dim light spilling out. I hesitated. Should I keep running, or take the risk? The sound of footsteps echoed behind me. My pulse raced again. I pushed the door open and ducked inside, closing it quietly behind me. Inside was a small room filled with bookshelves that reached the ceiling, covered in thick dust. The air was stale, as if no one had set foot here in years. I took a deep breath, trying to find my bearings. The shelves were lined with old leather-bound books, their titles faded. I stepped further in, scanning the spines. Maybe one of these books held the answers I needed. I reached for one that looked particularly worn. A chill ran through me as a soft thud came from behind the door. I spun around, expecting to see the children, but all I found was silence, heavy and unsettling. I turned back to the book, feeling an impulse to open it. Inside, the pages were yellowed, filled with hasty notes in the margins. Words like secrets, truth, and watchers jumped out at me, sending a chill down my spine. Then, something caught my eye. A folded piece of paper slipped out from between the pages and fluttered to the ground. I picked it up, my heart racing as I unfolded it. The note was another warning. They know you're here. Don't trust the shadows. I barely processed that when another heavy thud reverberated just outside the door. It was closer this time, and the air felt charged. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being cornered. Desperate, I scanned the shelves for anything that might help me. My hand landed on a dusty lantern. With no time to think, I grabbed it and fumbled to light it. The flickering flame illuminated the room, but the shadows twisted unnaturally, as if alive. The thuds returned, louder now. I pressed my back against the shelf, heart hammering. I had to know what was on the other side of that door. Taking a deep breath, I called out, "Who's there?" Silence. Then came a whisper, a voice so faint I could barely hear it. "Help us." It sounded like the children. I felt sick. Were they in danger? Or was it a trap? Before I could decide, the door swung open violently. I staggered back, the lantern nearly slipping from my grip. The hallway was empty, but the air crackled with tension. I stepped out cautiously, the note still clutched tightly in my hand. Whatever was happening here, I was no longer alone. Someone, or something, was watching me. Moving quickly back to the main corridor, I planned my next move. I couldn't just hide. I needed to uncover the truth behind this twisted nightmare before it swallowed me whole. Then, just ahead, I saw it. A door at the end of the hallway was ajar, a sickly glow spilling from the crack. Suddenly, I felt it again. The creep of shadows, drawing me closer, calling me to discover just how far down this rabbit hole went. I took a step forward, my instincts flaring to life. I needed answers, but I knew now they wouldn't come without a cost. I crept towards the glowing door, my breath hitching in my throat. The light pulsated faintly, beckoning me closer, and I felt an invisible pull as if some force was weaving its fingers into my very soul. My heart thudded painfully in my chest, the fear of what lay beyond battling with the desperate need for answers. With each cautious step, the air thickened, cavitating with an electric tension. Shadows flickered and danced along the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes. I clutched the lantern tightly, the flame wobbling in response to my racing thoughts. I had no idea what awaited me on the other side, and the weight of uncertainty pressed down hard on me. I reached the door, its surface warped and scarred, as if it had been battered by years of storms. My hand trembled as I placed it on the handle. Just then, the children's whisper echoed again, this time louder, more insistent. "Help us!" I turned to escape the grip of their words, but the shadows around me seemed to shift. They slithered toward the door, dark tendrils rising as if alive, as though they could sense my hesitation. I had to know what was inside, but every instinct screamed at me to run. I swallowed hard, pushed the door open and stepped inside. The sight before me sent a jolt of adrenaline through my veins. The room was a chaotic blend of colors, reds, blues, and purples swirled together. It looked like a child's fever dream. Old playthings were strewn across the floor, dolls with glassy eyes, toys long forgotten, and drawings plastered on the walls were shifting and writhing. In the center stood an altar made from crude blocks, each inscribed with strange symbols. A figure appeared at the far end of the room, framed in the light. It was a child, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with wild hair and wide, frightened eyes. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice trembling. "They'll take you too." "Take me where?" I managed, fear clawing at my throat. He pointed behind him, and I felt a chill wash over me as I gazed into the dark recesses of the room. Something shifted there. A massive shadow, darker than the night itself, looming and endless. A low growl rumbled from it, a sound like nails on chalkboard that scraped against my mind. "Run!" the child shouted, panic etched across his face. I hesitated for just a moment, but I knew I couldn't stay. I bolted back out the way I came, the door slamming shut behind me. I stumbled down the hallway, grappling for breath, my panic mounting. The whispers intensified as I ran, calling out in unison. "Help us! Help us!" But before I could reach the safety of the corridor, the lights flickered violently overhead, and the ground beneath me trembled. It was as if the very building was alive, as though it was angry at my intrusion. I stumbled to the ground, the lantern's flames sputtering and dying as the shadows closed in around me. Just before my vision darkened entirely, I caught another glimpse of the child through the barely open door. His eyes were full of despair, and for the briefest moment I understood. They weren't just trapped, they were warning me about what was coming. Then everything went dark. I awoke, gasping, on the floor of the corridor. My body ached, and my heart raced as I blinked against the harsh light of the overhead bulbs. Somehow, I had made it out, but the lingering terror gripped me tight. The whispers of the children still echoed in my mind, wrapping around my thoughts like a vice. I pushed myself to my feet, swaying slightly. My mind raced back to the room, the altar, the shadow, the child. Everything felt surreal. But I knew it was real. I had to find a way to understand what was happening. I had to return to that room, but fear chained me in place. Pushing those thoughts aside, I looked around. The corridor seemed the same, but felt different. The atmosphere was thick, charged with something dark. I took a deep breath and began to walk, each footfall heavy and cautious. As I rounded a corner, I stopped dead in my tracks. The walls, once dull, were now covered in drawings like those from the room. They depicted children, their faces twisted in fear and desperation. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. What did all of this mean? I pressed on, moving past the drawings. The whispers became clearer, rising and falling like a ghostly melody. "Help us." Their voices seemed to say, "You can save us." Suddenly I heard a loud thump behind me. I turned, but nothing was there, just empty air. My pulse quickened, and I half expected something to leap from the shadows. I forced myself to keep moving, to find a window or an exit, something to get away from this nightmare. But the corridor stretched on, endless and unfamiliar. Then out of the corner of my eye I saw it. A glimmer of light danced just ahead of me. It flickered like a beacon, and for a brief moment I felt a surge of hope. I rushed toward it, the whispers fading as I approached. As I drew closer, I realized it wasn't a simple source of light. It was an old ornate mirror set into the wall, its surface shimmering and swirling. My reflection appeared distorted, eyes wide with fear. But it wasn't just my reflection. I could see the shadows behind me flickering in the glass, hulking and monstrous. I reached out to touch the glass, drawn in by the swirling light. It felt warm, almost inviting. But before my fingers made contact, a loud crash echoed throughout the hallway. The mirror shattered, scattering shards across the floor. I jumped back, dread clawing at my gut. Then I heard it, a low growl, the same growl that had come from the shadow in the room. It was closer now, deep and resonant, vibrating through my bones. I turned to run, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement among the glass shards. The fragments twisted and shifted, forming the outline of a figure. I screamed, adrenaline propelling me forward as I bolted down the corridor, a new urgency filling me. I had to escape, but I felt that whatever darkness lurked in this place was hunting me. I had to find the children and help them, before it was too late. Just then I heard another voice join the whispers. This one was deeper, more menacing. You're not leaving. Not yet. My heart raced as I sprinted down the corridor, desperation propelling me forward. The deep, menacing voice echoed behind me, reverberating off the walls. You're not leaving. Not yet. It taunted, sending chills across my skin. I tore around a corner, my breath coming in sharp bursts, glancing over my shoulder only to find the corridor behind me empty. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was right on my heels, lurking in the shadows. I pushed myself harder, more frantic now. I needed a way out. The whispers of the children grew louder in my ears, clamoring for attention. Help us! Help us! I stumbled into a large room that opened up before me. It was empty save for remnants of old furniture and darkened corners that felt alive. Instinctively, I sought reassurance, a pathway to follow, hoping the whispers might guide me. The oppressive gloom felt stifling, and I felt my urgency begin to drown in the weight of the air, a thick, heavy mantle weighing me down. Suddenly, I spotted something in the center of the room, a small chest, ornate and surprisingly untouched by dust. It stood out like a beacon against the backdrop of decay. I hurried toward it, mind racing. What could be inside? Answers, tools to survive, or perhaps something that could provide insight into the horrors I had encountered. With trembling hands, I threw open the chest. Inside was another diary, similar to the one I had tried to read but never got the chance to fully explore. This one looked old, but held a peculiar vibrancy, as if it had been opened recently. Its pages were filled with illustrations of the dark figures and swirling shapes I had seen, juxtaposed with haunting sketches of children, their faces frozen in terror. One page caught my eye. Scrawled hastily across it were the words, "The truth lies in understanding." Below it, the shadow figures were depicted with children reaching toward a light. It seemed to suggest some connection I hadn't fully grasped. The door I had entered from suddenly slammed shut, a deafening noise that sent shockwaves through me. The whispers turned frantic. "It's coming! Run!" Just then, the air shifted, a chill stealing all warmth from the room. I could sense the darkness coalescing, growing closer. I panicked, grappling with the diary, flipping through pages, clutching desperately at anything that might illuminate my path. There, a drawing of the talisman I had found on the beach. I studied it, desperate to recall the warning from the shopkeeper. It protects the bearer from unwanted attention. I recalled the child's voice, the urgency with which they had urged me to help. Eureka! There was a connection. The children. The talisman. Maybe, just maybe, it could allow me to see whatever I was facing clearly. But where was it now? I checked my pockets frantically and found it had gone cold against my skin. I glanced back toward the entry, heart hammering. I was out of time, but as I did, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, the glimmer from the broken glass shards across the floor, shining like stars scattered through dark skies. Instinct pulled me toward them, and I dropped to my knees, fingers trembling as they swept through the shards. I had to grasp the truth, threads of reality, something that could break the hold of this space. Just then, the shadows slithered around me, echoing silent threats. "You're too late," they snarled. Ignoring them, I focused on the shards. I felt a spark, an echo of warmth. Could this piece of glass be my link? I clutched it hard, pressing it to my chest. The cold frightened me, but I steeled my resolve. If the children had been pulled into this nightmare, perhaps they were a part of it, the key to the truth. The room shook violently. I stood shouting over the chaos, "I'll help you! I won't leave you!" Something deep in my core finally clicked. The shadows drew closer, twisting their forms, but as they moved, a realization slid over me. The light from the shards, the warmth of their lives, it warded them off. The shadows recoiled momentarily. A chance. I darted toward the door that had now reappeared, firm yet malleable, as if it was uncertain of what it wanted to hold back. With renewed urgency, I flung it open, the lantern lighting my path as I sprinted down the spiraling corridor. The children's whispers grew distant, but echoed in my heart. "Find us." I ran until I could no longer hear the growl or feel the oppressive cold. The adrenaline coursed through me, fueling my need to escape. But as I reached what felt like an end, I found myself facing another carved wooden door, this one embossed with swirling patterns that seemed to breathe. The door creaked open before me, and I stepped into a new world, into bright sunlight and warm air. I nearly collapsed in relief as I found myself standing on the shoreline of the beach, the very place I had first arrived. But even as I turned, I glanced back at the cottage, its windows dark and lifeless. The memories swirled around me, familiar laughter mingling with a hint of shadows, waiting just outside the edges of my vision. I took a deep breath, the salty air filling my lungs. I was free. For now. But could I escape the memories? The truths left behind? Was I truly out, or was this just another layer in the tangled web of reality? I still didn't know. As I stared at the horizon, I felt the weight of questions settling over me. Would the truth ever be revealed? What lay in the depths of that cottage? And who, or what, had kept watch? I moved away from the beach, but in the back of my mind echoed that same laughter. For the tangled threads of reality never truly fade, only linger in the distance, haunting. I hoped the children didn't wait too long, and somewhere amidst the shadows there would be answers, a truth I may or may not be ready to uncover.